Hi everybody, Rachel here from Rachthestamper.com, and I want to thank you again for purchasing my July Club Kit to Go. So we're going to be making a variation of this card. I made this card for a blog hop, and I thought I would change it up just a little bit and show you an easier way to create it. This is a very fun sunset card, so you could do this with also, just as an idea if you wanted to, you could do it with pinks, and maybe going to a really light purple, and then you could do the clouds as blue if you kind of wanted the other side of the sunset, so like the reflection, not the necessarily the sunset. But I'm going to show you another way to make this a little bit easier as well. So what we're going to do before we start is I'm actually going to stamp the sentiment. Instead of thanks so much, I'm going to do inhale, exhale, enjoy. So I'm going to do the inhale and exhale first, and I just really honestly want this to have a chance to dry before we cut it. So inhale, exhale, and I'm going to stamp it twice just in case some of what I want doesn't necessarily turn out, so I can always cut it. And we can actually even put the enjoy on the inside if you kind of wanted to change it up a little bit. So that one's just a teeny bit cut off. Just grab a little scrap, a little bit bigger for the enjoy. And again, you could do this with any different sentiment that you want. Thanks so much. Relax. There's lots of other sentiments in the stamp set. So I'm going to set these on the side. And then I want to tell you one other thing. So for the blacks of this, and this is kind of just personal preference. Memento is a great ink. Stays on, dries a little too fast. I really, really like VersaFine. This is not an ink that Stampin' Up! Carries. I actually got this on Amazon. It's really great for details. One caveat though, it is a pigment ink, so it takes a little bit to dry, but it really gives an intense black look. So if you're looking for a black, VersaFine is really nice. I found that one that's really nice is a Gina K Designs Amalgam ink, because you can actually use blends, watercolors. You can do this for anything, but you definitely want to get the re-inker for this. So I don't have the re-inker. It wasn't available at the time, but it is a really nice black ink, and it's very versatile, so you could use it for many things. But this one, which is made by the same company, it's Sukinko, which makes Memento. They make Stays On. So they do make this. You can get this on Amazon. So I'm actually going to be using this for the water portion. So what we're going to do to get started is we're going to stamp the sun. And, whoops, that's not the color I want. Let me get the white. We do want crushed curry. And again, you can kind of put this up as high or as low as you want. This is shimmery white cardstock, so it is going to give a little bit nicer of a finished look versus the original here. So I'm kind of just eyeball where I want my sun. We'll go just like that. So that was crushed curry. Then we're going to move on. We're going to do a couple different yellows. So we're going to start with Daffodil Delight. And you are going to see me use the same brayer. You want to use a clean one because you don't want to contaminate your inks. I'm just being a little bit lazy. So just to keep this kind of in place, I'm just going to put a piece of Post-it tape here. Not really necessarily to block anything, but just to hold it still. So I'm going to start with the Daffodil Delight, which is a brighter yellow. You could also use Pineapple Punch if you still happen to have that. So there's that. Then I'm going to add a little bit of mango. So I'm going to run this just to clean it off a little bit. A little bit of mango. You want to make sure when you use your brayer, and just to show you this, you don't want to just go back and forth because you're only going to have color in one spot. You want to roll it so it actually rolls. You can even do this on the long side, but just make sure the whole thing spins when you do it, okay? So I'm going to go again. I'm going to start a little bit higher, kind of come down a little bit. Same thing again. So it's a little bit more orangey is what you want at the top. So that's mango. Now, pumpkin pie is considerably darker, so I'm not as worried about my contamination, but again, you could use a different brayer for these. Would probably be a very smart idea. So pumpkin pie last. And I'm going to go down just so it kind of blends a little bit. And if you wanted it even a little bit darker, you could add a little bit of terracotta. Kind of give you that deep orange at the top. I'm going to go down just a little. Okay, so there you go. So that pretty much covers the brayering portion. So I'm going to lift this sit this on the side. You guys know I reuse my tape a bazillion times. I'm going to wipe this off just so I don't mess up my layer here. With a wet, and then just with a cloth. Okay, so now here comes the part where you're really going to want to use a stamp positioning tool. The reason being is it's really going to help with your black if you don't like how black it is, if you want it to be darker, essentially. So I'm going to line this up. I kind of usually just pick a spot. So I have this lined up, and I'm going to put my magnet here, and actually I'm going to move this. I'm going to put one here because I really want to make sure this stays in place. So I have that, and I'm going to use the larger because there's two different ones. I'm going to use the larger, and I'm just going to set this here, and I do want it to be a little bit up into the top. So I don't want it below the line, the horizon line that we've created, okay? I want it to be right at the line. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this, and you could do this from the side, just depends on which one you want to do. So I'm going to take my VersaFine ink. This is much more helpful too if you have a Stamparatus, if you put another ink pad underneath. Okay, so we're going to close this, press down. Remember, when you're doing photopolymer stamps, it does take a moment for the ink to transfer from the stamp to the paper, okay? So if this isn't black enough, what we're going to do is we'll go back in. You do want a little bit of white to show, so you don't want it like totally black, but I'm going to at least stamp it once more. And since we use those magnets, it should be in the same place. Okay, now you kind of have a little bit of an option here, okay? You could do one of two things. You can either take a foam roller and you could go over this in black. You could do that. The other thing you could do is you can flip your card upside down and kind of find your lining up spot. So for example, for this one, it'll be right about here. Just going to put my magnet down, and you really only have to ink the one side. You can ink it to fill in. Okay, let me do it one more time, just so it's a little darker. So there's one. Then we'll come over here, just like so. I'm just going to put my magnet down again. I'm just inking the other side, so I'm not really bothering to ink the whole stamp because the whole stamp isn't really covering. Just like so. Okay, same like that. Then what I did, I still did do this just because I really wanted it to be a darker black at the bottom. Let me just put this on here so it doesn't go anywhere. I did use my brayer, and one thing I will tell you, when you have a black inked brayer, it's kind of like the same with the sponge dauber. I kind of just went over because I don't want to cover the sun so much, but I really did want to cover the bottom. So hold on one sec, you'll see what I'm doing in 1 second to finish up. So I went over just a little bit. Okay, so there is that. Now, one other thing you could do, because there's lots of other things, you can take your other stamp here, and this is what I'm going to do to piece the rest of it in. So I'm kind of just trying to find little spots, and it could be depending on what side you do, like you might do just this little piece here. And I just kind of filled it in just so it had that water texture. Let me scoot this over just a little. I just really want it to hold still. I'm not really necessarily want it in place, but Okay, and I'm going to go a little bit more, and this one I should do at the bottom. You could also, I'm trying to be very careful because I have black on my thumb. You could also trim this up a little bit if you don't want it quite as long. There we go. So I'm going to leave it like so for the water part, okay? Now what I'm going to do, and I want to make sure this is not going to move now. I'm just going to leave it right here. Now you can bring in the rest of the pieces. So I also brought these little guys here, which kind of look like they could be a cloud, they could be rocks, they could be a mountain. So I'm actually going to put them over here. So it almost looks like you have a little mountain something on the side. I know one place I went in Hawaii, there was something like this. It was so pretty. So there's that. And I'm going to bring in just this little small leaf just to change it up just a little bit. So kind of like a small leaf peeking in. You could always add in the larger one as well if you wanted to. And the last thing I'm going to bring in a cloud. And I think something about, oops, this is a little bit too, hold on, let me move this down just a smidge. Something about the color and then the black really makes the color so much more vibrant. Okay, so I think I'm going to add in just one of these larger palms. Trying to decide which way. Okay, one other thing, once your black dries, because this is going to take some time to dry, specifically if you do use this ink, you want to let it dry. That is probably one of the most important things that you want to do. Once it dries though, the color is going to settle a little bit more, and you're going to notice that there are going to be some white peek through spots, which you kind of want as like a slight reflection. So you don't want to just erase those because they don't necessarily go together. You can also, if you don't necessarily like maybe a certain part, you could put your sentiment in that spot instead, just to kind of cover it up. Or you could also spray this with a little bit of shimmer paint in a spritzer. But if you do that, you would want to cover the top because you don't want it to bleed up. So if that were the case, just for example, if this were a piece of paper, I would put this down and then you could spray that and then lift it up and out so it doesn't contaminate the rest of your picture. So just kind of like a little FYI. So I'm going to pick this up and move it. Move this out of the way. And while that is finishing drying, I'm going to go ahead and work on our sentiment. We'll put the rest of our layers together. We are almost finished. You will also have a Whisper White layer for the inside of your card. So I'm going to just put this down. Just put a little bit of liquid glue. This is a Just Jade layer. If you wanted to, since this is going to be completely covered, you could even put something else or cut something else out and use that for the inside as well. So for example, you could cut something out and then put that on the inside. So just another couple little options. I'm going to put this down. That way I don't touch it anymore. And then we'll add our sentiment to it in a minute. I'm trying my best to not touch it because this black, and the reason I know is because I have done it before, it really is wet for a good long time. So there's our card, and you could leave it like that. But I'm going to go ahead and trim out our little sentiment piece. And again, you can add as little or as much of this as you want. So cut this. But I think this will be a really nice card to share with someone too, even with just the current climate we're living in, depending on, I guess, when you're watching this video. With all the COVID, it might be nice for somebody to get a beautiful view, especially if maybe they were supposed to go somewhere fun and they miss their vacation. So inhale, exhale, and then I'm going to go ahead and do the enjoy. Because it's scripty, I do tend to like to cut this out. So I'm going to try to cut this a little bit more with it. So what I usually do is I'll take my scissors, and you don't want to move your scissors. You want to just move the paper around. And even though we stamped this a little bit ago, it's still just a teeny bit wet. So I'm really trying my best not to touch it. There we go. So inhale, exhale, enjoy. One other thing I'm going to do is pop these up just on some foam pieces that I happen to have. You could do this with dimensionals. You could stick it directly to the card. Really just depends on what you want to do. So if I can get these to turn over. I'm trying not to touch the black. That's why it's taking me a minute. So put this here. And one thing you probably want to do is try to make sure that when you cut your pieces, if you're going to add something to the back of it, that you cut it so it doesn't show. You could also take the time to put these on. I'm going to just trim this little piece off with tweezers. That way you don't touch anything if you're not exactly sure maybe where you want to put it down. There's that. And let's see, what do I have for this one? And the only one thing you want to keep in mind as well, and I'm not sure if some of you do or don't know this, but you cannot use foam strips and dimensionals interchangeably because they are different heights. Foam strips are actually taller than dimensionals. Just going to put this one right down here. So if you use them together, your card will be wonky. So foam strips are, you can see height-wise, just in case you didn't ever realize that, because I did once when I put them together. They're not that much different, and you wouldn't think it would show that much, but it does when you're putting a shaker card or something like that together. So, excuse me, so learn from my mistakes. Again, you could make this into a thank you card. You can also, again, cut that down to use something for the inside if you wanted to add something to the inside instead. Thank you guys so very much, as always, for joining me and for subscribing to this month's kit. It is an exclusive kit to this club, so if you did not purchase it, you don't get access to it. So thank you guys so much for joining me. If you have any questions, you can always send me an email. You can leave a comment here on the YouTube page directly, because as I said, no one has access to it except for the people who purchased the kit. And I hope you guys all enjoyed this. I will let you know as soon as I get the August kit figured out so we can get that going. And if you guys have any questions, just let me know. Thank you so much for watching, and have a great one.